Welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learnings. I am incredibly grateful and super honored to be joined by the co-author of a Go Giver book or collections. So I was very grateful to have Bob Burg last time. Now I've got his co-author, John David Mann. So thank you so much for joining me. We're going to talk about the Go Giver leader today. And we've also just had a really interesting conversation offline that we're going to share as well. So, John, thank you for being my guest.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you, Stephen.
So, author of over 30 books. You've had Seth Godin, Gary Keller, Lee Charles talking all about the incredible books you've written. And that's just to name check a few, because I've only heard of those. And I'm sure there's loads more everybody has heard of. So thank you for giving up your time today. I'm really grateful. So just tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into becoming an author of so many books?
Yeah, well, actually, I've come to this rather late in life. I did not start out planning to be a writer. In fact, I've kind of ping-ponged through a number of careers. I started out in life as a classical musician, a concert musician, played the cello and was a composer. And I was pretty serious about that career. Won some awards as a composer, and I was concertizing pretty widely as a cellist. But I became very intrigued in the question of health. And I got very involved in that field, nutrition and health. And I pursued that for years. And then I got very interested in business. And I pursued that for years and became an entrepreneur. But everything that I did, I always seemed to be the guy who was editing the newsletter or writing the article or whatever. And writing became sort of a common thread. And I eventually became a professional editor and then started writing books. Actually, it was Bob Burg who kind of pulled me. There's this scene in The Godfather, I guess it's probably part 2, where he says, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino says, I'm trying to get out of it, but they keep pulling me back in. And Bob Burg was the one who kind of pulled me into writing books. I'd planned to write movies. That was my deal at the time. And Bob said, would you write this book with me? I have this idea for a book, but I don't know how to write a book like this. You do. Would you do it? So that was The Go-Giver. And I haven't looked back. It's over 30 titles since then. And this turns out to be what I was put in the planet to do. So I'm really happy to be doing it.
Fantastic. So there must be a few lessons along the way that you've learned. So the Go-Giver leader is all about leadership. What did you learn? In fact, I'll be really fascinating. So you talk about being a classical musician,
Yes.
overcoming nerves to get on the stage. I work with loads of estate agents in the UK, and obviously they present every single day to all their customers, and they're going into people's houses, and some of them may be doing it for the first time and get incredibly nervous. How do you overcome your nerves when you're standing up and conducting and taking part in an orchestra?
I spent many years in sales, and particularly in sales coaching, and getting on the phone with a prospect is very similar to standing on the stage, or as a cellist, sitting on the stage, facing an audience. In that moment of silence before you pick up the bow and before you put your fingers to the strings and the music begins, it's like that moment before you open your mouth on the phone. It's very similar. Oddly enough, it's a very similar experience for me to sitting down in my chair at 5 o'clock in the morning with a pad of paper and a pen, and it's time to write. And there's no audience sitting there, but there is, because I know that on the other end of this pen, there are going to be thousands of people who are going to read this. And or not, depending on how successful the book is, how successful the pen is. So, and kind of the answer is the same in all those situations. It's as long as I'm thinking about myself, I'm going to freeze. If I'm on the phone with a prospect thinking, how do I look? How do I sound? What am I going to say? What's my pitch? What's my product? What's my deal? What's my advantage? Whatever it is. If I'm on stage thinking about, oh my gosh, I hope I have this memorized. I hope the thing's in tune. I wonder how this is going to go. It's not going to go well. And so I learned to train myself when I was a public speaker to stand up in front of an audience, and the last words in my brain before I would begin speaking would be, what do I have? What can I say that they most need to hear? Who are these people? What are they after? What do they want? What are their lives like? What are their fears, their hopes, their dreams? And you kind of have to think the same thing as a musician. You have to think about the people out there, and what they came to hear and why they're here and how much they love music and how devoted they are to music because they're sitting in these seats, not at home watching television. And it's the same with writing. You have to take your pen and say, all right, who's going to pick up this book and read it? And what's their life like that? What are they looking for? What pleasures them? What pleases them? What makes them excited? What makes them thrilled? It's the whole, the Go-Giver Leader. You asked about life lessons, and we'll get to a big one of those in a sec. The Go-Giver Leader was originally published under a different title.
I saw that.
You saw that, yes. When Bob and I put out The Go-Giver, the original book, for audiovisual aid, the original book, the red book, The Go-Giver. After that book did well, the publisher immediately said, we want 2 more books out of you guys. And one of them was the green book, Go-Giver Sell More, which is kind of a manual for sales from a Go-Giver point of view. And they said, for the other one, write a parable, another parable. We don't care what it's called. We don't care what it's about. Write another parable. So we did, and it had a yellow cover, and the title was, It's Not About You. And the idea there was everything I've just been saying the last 5 minutes, that when you sit down in a transaction of any kind, in an exchange, in a relationship, if you put your focus on the other person, not only is that altruistic and noble and generous, it's also tactically smart. It's pragmatic, because you're going to perform better. You're going to have a better transaction. You're going to play better music, write better words, have a better sale transaction if your focus is on the other person. So we published this book. It's called It's Not About You. And apparently a lot of people looked at it and said, it's not about me. I guess I won't buy it. And the book just went thunk. And here we were. And here's the lesson. After the success of The Go-Giver, which was very successful pretty much right out of the gate, we were completely prepared for the next book to be even more successful, because our publisher thought it was an even better book than the first. Our agent thought it was an even better book than the first. My wife said, wow, you've outdone yourself. This book is even better than The Go-Giver. That's what we thought would happen. And it didn't. It's like people who read it loved it, but not very many people read it because it was a problem of presentation. And for me, the experience was a bitter one. For several years, as we watched the book not sell very well, I had kind of a crisis of confidence. And I thought, is this a one-hit wonder situation? This is the problem with any sequel in any genre, if it's movies or performance, or if you're in business. If you have a great month, you start to worry about the next month. If you're an entrepreneur and you started a business that did really well and you're starting a new business, you almost suffer from the gravitational pull of the previous success. And eventually Bob and I realized that the title was a big part of the problem, and the fact that it wasn't presented as a Go-Giver book, even though it clearly is. And so we went back to our publisher and said, can we repackage this? Can you republish it? Different cover, different title. We changed a little bit. I tweaked the ending. I tweaked the beginning. It was a little bit of change in the book, but really the text is 98% the same book. And they said yes. And they did it, which is a rare thing for a publisher to agree to, take what was basically a failure and try it a second time. And so we published it as The Go-Giver Leader, as this blue book that we love so much today. And it's done very well. It turned out to be a good move.
So actually,
of those first, I was going to say, of those first 3 books, The Go-Giver, The Go-Giver Sell More, and The Go-Giver Leader, this one is nearest and dearest to my heart, and I feel most it's like personally close to. So I'm really, really happy it worked. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, so why is that? Why are you so close to this one compared to the other 2?
We did The Go-Giver, then came The Go-Giver Leader, and after that came a book called The Go-Giver Influencer, which is really kind of about negotiation and about reconciling differences. That third book is really Bob's material. It's largely from his book, Adversaries and Allies. There's principles anyway. It was inspired by that book of Bob's. The original Go-Giver is kind of a 50-50. It's Bob's stuff and my stuff all mixed in a barrel. The Go-Giver Leader was kind of my baby in the sense that leadership was a theme that I'd always written about. It's been a subject very close to me forever. My father was a conductor. He was a choral conductor. So I grew up watching my father move his hands and 100 people do something all together in harmony. And not just in concert, but in rehearsal. I grew up watching him manage the egos and personalities and so on of a lot of temperamental professional musicians. And I watched the way he did it. And he was a master at bringing everybody together and bringing everybody along. And leadership was always intriguing me. Then in my career as a sales coach and as a sales leader, I had an organization of 100,000 people at one point. You can't talk to 100,000 people. You can't coach 100,000 people. You can't interact directly with 100,000 people. It's where you start to learn the leverage of your behavior so that the little things you do end up making an enormous difference among many, many people because they filter down through ranks. A lot of leadership lessons there. So when it came time to taking a Go-Giver approach to the realm of leadership, that was very close to me. And then in writing the book, I drew a lot of sort of autobiographical elements in sketching Ben's story. I mean, Ben's son, Robbie, who does the martial arts, that was my boy, Nick. Ben and his wife, Melanie, had lost their first child, and that had happened to me and my wife at the time. So that was, it was one of the blessings of being a writer is that you get to take tragedies and difficulties in your own life and bring them into a sort of semi-fictional or fictional sphere where they can enrich a message and make a difference in many, many other people's lives. You sort of transmute one's own pain into a greater good. So that was, part of what makes that book so close for me.
Brilliant. Well, a couple of questions from what you said. So firstly, what actually does make a good leader in your opinion?
It's funny. It kind of goes back to, there are a number of things. And in the book, we have these 5 principles of leadership, and there's like the one is to lead with a vision. You have to see things that nobody else can see and believe in something when nobody else believes in it and so on. And then there's leading with your heart and leading with your gut. There are a number of leadership principles in the book, but stepping away from what's already in the text, I think the first thing is that love leads, that when you're passionately in love with this thing that we're all doing together. My father's love of Bach, Handel, classical Baroque music, which was his specialty, was enormous, and it was in his bones. He grew up in Hamburg. He grew up in the heart of Bachland. So it was in his blood. If you're leading a business that is about whatever it's about, in Tony Hsieh, who's gone now, but who was the creator of Zappos, he wasn't passionate about shoes, but he was passionate about the culture that he built in that organization. You have to have that kind of passion as a politician, as a business leader, as a religious leader, as a community leader, any kind of leader, because you can't fake that. You can fake it, perhaps, one-on-one, one-on-two, but when your actions are magnified through thousands of people, everything that's going on comes to light. So if you're faking it, it shows up in the form of mediocrity and conflict. So number one, you have to have love. You have to be in love with what you're doing. And I think number two is the original book title. have to make it not about yourself. It's not about you. If your passion in leadership is about raising other people, elevating the people in your ranks, so to speak, bringing out the best in other people. There's a moment in the book, in The Go-Giver Leader, where one of the characters in there, Frank, who manages the physical production of the furniture in this company, he talks about this process they have of heating up wood, natural wood, so that it's almost at the burning point where colors start to come out. And by the way, this was based on an entrepreneur I knew about who was actually doing exactly that. But he said it was bringing out what was in the wood, bringing out its natural interior to the surface. That's what great leadership does. It brings people's greatness out to the surface so that they become better people than they were. If, on the other hand, you go out as a leader and it's all about the spotlight is on me, and I'm here on the stage because I want a billion people to know how great I am, that to me is leadership that in the long run will cause pain and damage. No, I don't care for that kind of leadership.
Okay. So you talked about ego and personalities that your dad faced. So in life, in leadership, you're going to face many egos and many personalities.
Yes.
Again, how would you deal with somebody that's got such a big ego? You know, they think, especially in sales, they think they're so much better than anybody else. They think, I do the most amount of sales, I can get away with whatever I want.
You know, it's a funny thing about that. Typically, somebody who's showing out with a big ego, underneath that, there's an equally big insecurity. My wife, who is a psychologist, has taught me that a narcissist is somebody who didn't get enough attention, is somebody who didn't get their ego built when they were 3 months old, 6 months old. You know, at that age, you need your parents or your auntie or whoever looking over you and cooing over you and saying, oh my God, this is the most beautiful baby ever born, right? You need people around you saying, you are so strong. You are so amazing. Oh, look at you. You can read that book all by yourself. You need this as a child. If you don't get it, you know, in cases where that's lacking to a pathological degree, a person can develop with such a hole in themselves that they overcompensate by becoming pathologically narcissistic. And to a less pathological degree, people with big egos typically have soft underbellies and some inferiority sense inside. So here's the way you don't deal with a big ego: is to battle it, is to go head on and say, you know what, you're not so big, you're not so great. There's other blokes here who know more than you do. That's just only going to make things worse. Weirdly, one way that you deal with somebody with a big ego is you build them up, you support them. You let them know what you think is great about them, not the thing they're bragging about typically, but something else. Like they may be bragging about their prowess as a salesperson, and you may say, you know, I love how devoted you are to your kids. It's like, where did that come from? Well, you know, you just find some way to praise them. And then the kind of the jujitsu of it is to enroll them in something larger than themselves. You know, as long as it's about their sales record, their performance, their prowess, then you're playing the deck of cards that they're dealing, and you can't win that game. So what you do is you flip out of that and you enroll them in the bigger goals of the company, or in the bigger goal of supporting this new person who's starting out. You get them out of their ego in something else that you enroll them in engaging, letting them know that you know they're totally capable of clearing the moon with this, and divert them, enroll them.
Okay, so you've most probably met a lot of exceptional leaders out there. Who has been the best that you've come across, and why?
You know, of course, I mentioned my father already, and that's always the first person I think of. And what was exceptional about him was that it's interesting, his job, if you will, his career path required him to stand in a huge auditorium with 100 or maybe 200 or 250 people and speak and have everyone hear him and follow his directions. He had the softest voice. He was incapable of raising his voice. I just mean physically. his voice was a very soft voice. And so I grew up watching this man whose voice wouldn't carry to the next room, speaking in front of 250. And so everybody would have to like lean in to hear him. And so what was great about him was how he commanded with gentleness. And that's something I really learned from him. Another leader who's alive, who is with us currently, that I guess I'd single out is Dan Rockwell. Dan is the man who created the blog Leadership Freak. I think it's leadershipfreak.com or leadershipfreak.blog, or maybe both. He's been running this thing for years and years, I think 2009 or something. And it's one of the most popular leadership blogs in the world. I mean, leaders from all across the board of industries follow his blog. Dan and I actually got to write a parable with Dan about leadership, which is coming out in a few months. He approached me a few years ago and said, "I'd like to write a parable with you." And I was like, "This is like shades of Bob Burg. We'll do this all over again." So this has been a really, really exciting thing for me. What I've noticed about Dan is that he's kind of a living embodiment of everything my father did. He's very soft-spoken. He's very amenable. He's very pliable. He's very malleable. He is somebody who is almost allergic to putting himself out front, to bragging or boasting. And so we've had some fascinating conversations with our publisher, with our marketing department, when they sit down and talk to authors about how you're going to promote the book. I've had these meetings with Bob many times with Portfolio, our publisher. And so when it came time for Dan and me to have a conversation with our marketing department, they said, "How are you going to promote this book?" It was so funny. It was for Dan. It was almost like, well, let me see. First off, my goal is to not do any injury to my people. They've been following me for years, and I've never promoted anything. So how can I do this without promoting to them, and without marketing to them, and it's like all these things he didn't want to do. Passionate about the book, passionate about getting the message out, but very, very cautious about doing anything that would feel pushy or injurious to his folks. I find that so inspiring. I just find that a tremendous set of qualities in a leader. And here's the irony: it's a set of qualities that people will follow. People will love to follow someone like that. People love to follow somebody who is modest, who is self-effacing, who is cautious about putting himself forward. So, there's so many examples of that, but, Dan is the one that springs to mind because I've just been close to him personally.
Thank you. You also discussed culture, or you mentioned the word culture.
Yeah.
How, if you're building a big business or a big estate agency in the UK, how do you start building a culture?
It's kind of not a two-edged sword. What's a better way of saying it? They're kind of two prongs. There are two aspects to building a culture, I think. And they complement one another. And neither one works, I think, effectively without the other. One of those prongs is to articulate a set of behaviors. You could say principles, but principles is too abstract. You could have a principle that says our company is going to be the best in the world. Well, what does that mean? It means nothing. We're going to put our people first. Yeah, okay, that's nice, but it's also pretty vague. But if you articulate a set of behaviors, in this situation, this is how we respond. In this situation, this is how we behave. Our people behave like this in the face of X, Y, Z. And if you actually describe those, you articulate those, that starts to describe a culture. Zappos, I mentioned them earlier. They did a magnificent job of doing that. On the other hand, if you just do that, just articulate it, it's only a document, it's only words. The other prong is, then you have to walk that talk, manifest that. So what you do, the key to that is consistency. It's consistency and persistency is so that whenever somebody attacks you, or whenever there's a challenge, or whenever there's a shortfall, or whenever any kind of stress to the system happens, people look at you and you're behaving exactly the same way every time. You're doing exactly what you described, and you're doing it the same way every time. You're doing it with every person, and there's no exceptions. Or if there are exceptions, then you explain why there's an exception here because of some reason that is in harmony with what you described. So it's the articulation and the behavior, and both of those you really have to, I think, put a lot of thought into. That's probably one of the biggest jobs of a leader of any kind of organization, is beyond the machinations and the particulars and the logistics and the admin and all of that. Is it's your job to orchestrate the behavior of people, both in words and in your actions.
How do you get the buy-in then? Because the leader may have a great vision, a great plan, a great purpose, but the team can't buy into it.
The one-word answer I'd give to that is listening. I think the way you get buy-in is by having a dialogue, and the way you have to actually ask people what they think, what they believe, how they feel, where they're at, what they need, what they want, where they're going. Engage in a dialogue that's more of a monologue from their side. It's really more of an interview than a dialogue, really. And again, if you lead an organization of 10,000 people, you can't do that with 10,000 people. So that becomes a part of your culture, is that we talk with our people and we listen to them. We find out what their aspirations and their goals are in their lives. And we look for ways that we can match with that with our company. And then we set up a structure so we can do that, through chains and chains and chains of command, so that it filters down to everybody, so that it even is filtering down ultimately to our customers, because that's what we want to do with our customers. We want to say to our customers, what you just walked into our stores, what is it you're looking for? What is it you want? What is it you need? Maybe we can help with that, rather than, hey, look at our widget over here. It's only $9.99 today. So that's the word, listening. I think you can't get buy-in by demanding it or even asking for it. The way you get it is by having a conversation with people and finding out who they are and where they're at.
Okay, so managing upwards. So I think Ben wanted to manage upwards with his merger there, and get the buy-in or share with the leaders, what he thought he could do. What's the best way of managing upwards?
Say, if you would, a sentence or two about what you mean by managing upwards. I don't fully connect to the idea what that is.
Okay, so effectively, your MD, your CEO is giving you some orders. You've got to then deliver those instructions to your colleagues below. So you manage downwards, but you've also sometimes got to manage the CEO as well, and have conversations with him that may be fierce conversations, tough conversations that you don't want to have as well. Any suggestions how you can deal with that?
That's a great question. I don't know. I have to think about that for a second. I guess, I suppose that it just kind of comes down to sort of some of the same principles, which is, for the moment, I mean, yes, you're in a position superior to me. And so technically speaking, you're above me, you can fire me, you can control, you can demand of me and so forth. But I think we sort of have to temporarily set that to the side and realize that we're just two human beings. And so sort of have a conversation on that basis. You can't set that to the side totally, because it's there, it's right next to you, but sort of move it into the passenger seat rather than the driver's seat, and let the driver's seat of this conversation be, okay, so here's what I'm experiencing. Here's my situation. Here's what's happening for me. I need to tell you this. I need to ask you this. I need to, to suggest this, and then find out what you think.
Brilliant, thank you. So I was fascinated going through and doing a little bit of research about you. And another of my favorite books, obviously, apart from The Go-Giver, is Dr. Spencer Johnson, Who Moved My Cheese. And
Yes.
I'm fascinated to see that you've written Out of a Maze with him. And I know, sadly, Dr. Spencer Johnson passed away. So, what were the lessons? Because Who Moved My Cheese, I think, is exceptional when we talk about change. And obviously, the way the economy is going from where it has been, we're seeing a lot of change at the moment. So, what lessons did you learn from Dr. Spencer Johnson? And tell us a little bit about the book as well, please.
Yeah. Well, that was an extraordinary situation for me. It's many years ago, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Johnson, and my wife and I went up to his cabin in New England by this big lake, and spent several days there with him, working on a project, a different project. And so that was how I got to know him. We both had the same agent. I should actually, let me back up just a few steps. Way back when Bob and I first had the Go Giver manuscript, and we had no publisher and we had no connections, and we were just us. I got a connection to an agent, and as it happened, it was the agent who had sold Spencer Johnson's book, The 1 Minute Manager, Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson, 1980. Of course, an enormous success. It's way before Who Moved My Cheese. And that had been what launched his career as a famous author. And that also launched my agent's career as a highly successful agent. And I somehow lucked into a connection to her, which was cool because The 1 Minute Manager was the only parable I'd ever really read when I wrote The Go Giver. It's like that was my model. And that was my kind of hero in business parables. So before I knew about this agent, when Bob and I were still just us, we dummied up a mock copy of the book. We didn't have any idea how to get published or anything. We just had a manuscript and a hope and a dream. And so we dummied up this mock copy of the book, and it said, The Go Giver, 5 Principles for Life and Business. And then it said, with a foreword by Spencer Johnson, and which I just made up, right? And it said, 5 million copies sold. And I think Oprah Winfrey had a quote on the top, and so on. And it stuck that on my wall. And Oprah Winfrey, to my knowledge, has never seen the book so far. It has not sold 5 million copies, but it has sold over 1 million copies.
Amazing.
And while Spencer Johnson did not write the foreword for that book, he did write a cover endorsement for the next book, Go Giver Sell More. And then some years later, just to show how vision becomes reality, then some years later, I got to work with him on this project. Then, flash forward a few years, our Go Giver publisher, Adrian Zackheim, Portfolio Books, wrote to me and said, I have a project I want to talk to you about, super secret project. And I wrote back and said, well, can you say anything about what it is? And he just wrote back, Spencer Johnson. I went, holy cow. Spencer by this time had just died. He'd been gone for, I forget if it was for months or for a year by then, but it had been just for a while. It was recent. And then I got on the phone with Adrian. He said, yeah, Spencer has been working on the ideas for a sequel to Who Moved My Cheese for years, but he couldn't quite get it off the ground. It isn't finished. It isn't even close to finished. In fact, it's not really even begun. He gave me piles of notebooks, and there were just notes and notes and notes and notes. And what I knew was that Spencer wanted to write a book about belief, about changing your belief systems, stepping out of your current beliefs and trying on a new belief. But he didn't. There was no storyline. There was no title. That was it. And then lots of notes. So I said, okay. And Spencer has a very particular way of working, a very detailed, proscribed methodology for how he puts words in a page, to the point where even every line has a number on it, and only a certain number of lines per page and a certain number of words per pages. And his books are very, very simple, like children's books. He was a children's author before 1 Minute Manager, so that's not an accident. So to write this book, I had to not only figure out what to say and what to have the title and but also to really adopt the style of this genius who was an MD morphed into a children's author, morphed into a business parable author. And so the book is about the first book, Who Moved My Cheese, is about going through this maze to find your cheese because somebody moved it from here over to there. This next book is about, even if you go through the maze, you still can't find the cheese. You have to actually get out of the maze altogether and escape into a world that you previously couldn't imagine. It's almost like living in a two-dimensional world and trying to imagine three dimensions. There's a lovely book called Flatland, Flat, Flatland, which is published decades and decades ago, because I remember reading it as a kid, which is exactly that. It's about the adventures of a dot and a line trying to imagine a three-dimensional world. And so that was kind of in the back of my head with this Out of the Maze. And yeah, I guess what I learned in that is that it was almost like being a movie actor and playing the role of somebody else, like being Meryl Streep and pretending to be Margaret Thatcher on screen. And a great actor, doesn't just pretend. They kind of put that person on and become that person. That's sort of what you have to do in a case like this, is become Spencer Johnson and write this book. So that book is near and dear to my heart. And him, who was left behind at the end of the last book, I'll just say this, he meets an altogether new character that we invented for this new book. And he does, in fact, get out of the maze and show you how you can get outside your current belief systems to embrace something that you never saw possible before.
Okay, and where can we get that book?
Oh, anywhere. Amazon, Waterstone, everywhere books are sold, there it is.
Fantastic. I'm really conscious of time, and I'm really grateful for how long we've been going already. Thank you. Can I just ask you a couple of other questions, if that's okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So actually, something there that really resonated with me was you talked about having a vision, and you talked about the 5 million sales, and you talked about the foreword by Dr. Spencer Johnson as well. And I'm a firm believer that vision boards work. You may not get them on day one, but every successful person I've ever spoken to, there's a reason why they're successful, and they all have vision boards. Why did you start having a vision board? What's the importance and significance for you?
I've been, I've been involved in sort of the creative process, if you will, since I was a kid. Because as I said, I started out as a composer and a cellist. And so I was writing music before I was writing words, practically. There's something kind of peculiar about that sphere of activity, because you're creating things that don't exist. You're kind of dreaming up, snatching out of the air, so to speak, melodies, harmonies, structures, and then themes, characters, personalities, plot lines, storylines that don't exist, and then you snatch them out of the air and you make them up. I have a writing program I do. It's a 1-year coaching program for aspiring writers. Anybody who wants to write a book, rank beginners or experienced professionals, all types. And the program goes through all of the craft and the techniques of writing, but we start out with this business of capturing a vision, capturing what it is you're going to do before you do it. Right now, we're talking about creating this thing, which in the movie world, the screenwriting world, they call a log line, which is a single sentence that captures the essence of the entire story, such that if I read you the sentence, you won't know all the details of the story, but you're immediately going to get a sense of the whole thing and say, "Oh, I got to read that," or "Oh, I got to see that." Like my first thriller was called Steel Fear. It came out a few years. I'm writing novels now. The log line for that was a traumatized Navy SEAL stalks a serial killer on an aircraft carrier in the midst of the Pacific Ocean. And it's less than 20 words, but it prompted a bidding war in Hollywood for the movie rights, just because that's how powerful words can be.
Wow.
That's what a vision board is like. A log line is just a vision board in words, and it's. I think that you almost have to work on your vision of things, whether it's your business or the book you're writing or the child you're raising or whatever, because ultimately your vision is going to influence everything you do, all your behavior, all your words, all your actions, and those are going to influence everybody around you, and that's going to influence all the things that happen. And it's the ripples that proceed from the vision you hold in your head, consciously or not, are going to be profound. If it's not conscious, if you don't do the work of actually taking a look at what you're seeing, but you just let it sit up there, then because we're human beings, typically there'll be a lot of noise and there'll be a lot of negativity in that vision, and we'll create a lot of chaos and confusion in our lives. So I think the importance of vision is taking a look at what you already think, and take a look at what you're already telling yourself, and playing a conscious role in editing that, directing that, and articulating that, and crafting that in a direction that you like. It's like that thing we talked about, the leadership's role in a company is articulating those behaviors, those codes, because if you don't articulate them, then it'll just be chaos.
100%. Thank you. So one final question. As a leader, okay, there is loads of constant negative news at the moment with what's going on with mortgage rates. I mean, mortgage rates have gone up, or interest rates have gone up for the 13th month in a row yesterday. They went up by 0.5%. Inflation in the UK should be coming down. It stayed at 8.7%.
Yeah.
Costs are going up rather than down. As a leader, how do you try and keep your team motivated when all they're hearing is maybe, oh, you know what, these people can't buy, they can't afford it, they don't want to sell?
Well, of course, it starts with how do you keep yourself motivated, and then how do you translate that to your people? All that stuff you describe, of course, it is going on now. On the other hand, it is going on always. There's always been a flood of bad news. Go back to Juvenal in ancient Rome. There's always been, we've always been beset with plagues and bad news around us. And I think, one of the things that happened for us with the Go-Giver came out at the very beginning of 2008, at a time when things were feeling a little funny, right? And then as the year progressed, they got not so funny. Of course, the economy went through the worst catastrophe in our generation, in our lifetime. And we thought, well, this little book about being nice to other people and putting other people's first is just going to tank. People aren't going to have time for that. Their houses are underwater. Their 401ks or their savings are gone. As the economy went down, the book went up. Sales actually increased, and we learned something from that, which is that in bad times, people become introspective and want to kind of question their own values and seize on to things that are noble and true and good, as it says in Corinthians. So I think by the time we got around to writing the second book, Go Give or Sell More, we were then deep in the recession of 2009 and very aware of that. And so might be a chapter. I don't have that book next to me, but I think there's a chapter in there about your economy. But whether it was a chapter title or it's just in the book, what we said basically was, you can't control the economy, but you have no control over the economy, but you have much more control than you think over your economy. That goes down to the old business of sphere of influence versus sphere of control. Sphere of influence is everything that influences you, including the weather and the economy and politics. Then there's sphere of control, which is what there is in your world that you can actually directly control or influence yourself. And so what you're describing is there's all this noise coming at us, the noise of negativity. The only way to deal with that is you can't really shut it off. You can turn the volume down maybe, but you can't shut it off because we don't live in a desert island. We live in this world. What you can do is you can turn up the volume of your own noise, the sound you're making, which is the ways you can control your own economy. We talk about in the book is the more valuable you make yourself in your market, the more, no matter how bad the economy is, people will come to you for your goods and services because you've made yourself valuable. You are your most valuable product, as it says in the law of authenticity. So, the only way you can really deal with bad news is acknowledge it. Yep, it's there, but keep yourself squarely focused on the good noise, the good news, the the stuff you can control, that you can generate, which is always going to be about creating value, creating more value. More bad news comes, create more value.
Well, you have created so much value today, so thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast, so thank you so much. How do people get hold of you?
Easiest is my website, which is just my name, johndavidmann.com. And I've got, all my books are on the website. I have a blog, which at times has been very active. There's a ton of essays on there. I'm not currently so active because I'm so busy writing books. My writing program, there's a page on that. There's a little contact where if you wanted to actually reach me, you go to the contact button and those emails go to me. I don't have an assistant. I am my assistant. So
brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you everybody for watching and listening today's episode. Really grateful as well. And John, I look forward to reading further books and you getting up to 50 books.
Yeah, we're getting there. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time.